How can one cruel joke at a crowded party lead to the end of a marriage? What happens when a wife mocks her husband in front of everyone, only to find herself served with legal papers in front of the same crowd? Can a woman who always thought she was the clever one survive the consequences when her husband finally acts? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers as the process server announced my name in front of 50 party guests. Morwenna Vole, you're being served with divorce papers. The same crowd that had laughed when I called my husband a wrinkled prune 3 weeks ago now stared in stunned silence as my world crumbled in real time. The trendy restaurant's private banquet room buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. I adjusted my new dress, the red one Julian said was too tight, and surveyed the crowd of friends and family gathered for my cousin's engagement party. This was my moment to shine, to show everyone how witty and modern I was, compared to my boring accountant husband. Julian sat quietly at our table, nursing his beer, while I regaled the group with stories about our recent vacation. Well, my version of our vacation. So there we were at this amazing rooftop bar in Miami, I said, gesturing dramatically. The music was incredible. Everyone was dancing, and Julian here, I patted his shoulder condescendingly, wanted to go back to the hotel room at 9:30 because he had to organize his receipts. The table erupted in laughter. My mother Dawn practically cackled. "Oh, honey, that's hilarious. Julian, you need to learn to live a little." Julian's jaw tightened slightly. "I just thought we could enjoy a quiet evening together. We'd been out every night." "A quiet evening?" I rolled my eyes theatrically. "We're in Miami, not the retirement home." More laughter rippled around the table. I caught Elliot Crane's eye from across the room. He was grinning and shaking his head in amusement. My heart fluttered slightly. Elliot understood me. He appreciated my humor. Julian's mother, Margaret, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Morwenna, dear, perhaps—" "Oh, Margaret, don't defend him," I interrupted with a wave of my hand. "Julian knows I'm just teasing. Don't you, honey?" I squeezed his arm harder than necessary. Besides, someone has to keep him young. Left to his own devices, he'd probably be in bed by 8 every night with his spreadsheets and tax forms. "Actually," Julian said quietly, "I was organizing those receipts for our tax return. You know, the one that saves us $3,000 every year." The table went quiet for a moment. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. He was making me look bad in front of everyone, making it seem like I didn't appreciate his work. "Oh, Julian," I said with exaggerated sweetness, always so practical. "So, responsible." I paused for effect, then delivered my killer line. "Sometimes I think I married a wrinkled prune instead of a man." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Dawn burst out laughing, nearly spitting out her wine. Several friends at the table joined in. Elliot, who had moved closer to our table, was grinning widely and giving me a subtle thumbs up. But Julian's face went completely still. The color drained from his cheeks, and something shifted in his eyes. Something I'd never seen before. Our 6-year-old daughter Tilda, who had been coloring quietly beside him, looked up with confusion. "Daddy's not a prune," she said in her small voice. "Daddy's nice." The laughter died down, but I was riding high on the attention. "Of course Daddy's nice, sweetie. Mommy was just being silly." I ruffled her hair and shot Julian a look that said, "Lighten up." Julian stood up slowly, his movements careful and controlled. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I need some air." "Oh, come on, Julian," I called after him as he walked away. "It was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." But he didn't turn around. He walked straight out of the restaurant without another word. "Men," Dawn said, shaking her head. "So fragile. He'll get over it." Margaret Vole gathered her purse and stood up. "I think I'll check on him," she said stiffly, avoiding my eyes. "Margaret, really, he's fine," I said. He just needs to develop a sense of humor about himself. But Julian's mother was already walking away, following her son out of the restaurant. The party continued around me, but something felt different. Tilda kept looking toward the door where her father had disappeared. Julian's father Gerard was unusually quiet, just nodding politely when people spoke to him. I pulled out my phone and posted on social media. Just delivered the burn of the century at cousin's party. Sometimes you have to keep your husband humble. Married life, and sorry, not sorry, and iconic moments. The likes and laughing emojis started pouring in immediately. Elliot was one of the first to respond. Absolutely savage. I felt vindicated. See, people appreciated my wit. Julian was just being overly dramatic. But as the evening wore on, I noticed Julian never came back inside. When I finally went to look for him, Gerard told me quietly that Julian had taken a taxi home and that Margaret had driven Tilda back as well. He seemed upset, Gerard said, his tone neutral, but somehow disapproving. He'll be fine, I said dismissively. He always gets moody when he's the center of attention. He'll get over it. But as I drove home alone later that night, I couldn't shake the image of Julian's face when I'd called him a wrinkled prune. There had been something final about his expression, something that made my stomach twist uncomfortably. I pushed the feeling away. Julian was too passive to stay mad for long. By morning, everything would be back to normal. I had no idea how wrong I was. I woke up the next morning expecting to find Julian in bed beside me, ready to apologize for his dramatic exit from the party. Instead, I found his side of the bed, untouched and cold. Padding to the kitchen in my robe, I discovered Julian was already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and his laptop. He was fully dressed in his weekend clothes, khakis and a button-down shirt, and looked like he'd been up for hours. "Morning," I said cheerfully, determined to act like nothing had happened. "Sleep well?" He didn't look up from his screen. "I slept in the spare room." "Oh." I poured myself coffee, trying to keep my tone light. "Julian, about last night." "Where's Tilda?" he interrupted. "Still sleeping. It's only 8:30. I sat down across from him. "Look, if you're upset about the prune comment, I was just joking around. Everyone knew I was kidding." Julian's fingers paused over the keyboard. Slowly, he raised his eyes to meet mine. "Did they?" There was something different about his voice, calmer than usual, but with an edge I'd never heard before. "Of course they did. Come on, Julian. You know I don't mean it when I tease you. I was just having fun with everyone." "Fun." He repeated the word like he was testing how it sounded. "Is that what you call humiliating your husband in front of 50 people? I felt a flash of irritation. "Humiliating? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? It was one little joke." "One little joke?" Again, that strange repetition. "Tell me, Morwenna, when you called me a wrinkled prune, were you thinking about how that might make me feel? Or were you just thinking about the laugh you'd get?" The question caught me off guard. Julian, you're being way too sensitive about this. Everyone jokes about their spouses. It's normal." "Normal?" He nodded slowly. "I see." He turned back to his laptop and resumed typing. The sound of the keys clicking filled the silence between us. "What are you working on?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "Just organizing some files." I noticed a stack of papers beside his laptop, bank statements, what looked like phone bills, and some documents I couldn't identify from where I sat. "Julian, seriously, can we just move past this? I'm sorry if your feelings were hurt, okay? But you left me alone at the party. That was embarrassing for me too." He stopped typing again. "You were embarrassed?" "Yes. When you stormed out like that, people started asking questions. It made me look bad." Something flickered across Julian's face, an expression I couldn't quite read. "I see. So you're the victim here." "I'm not saying I'm a victim, but—" "Daddy?" Tilda's sleepy voice interrupted us. She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Why didn't you eat breakfast with us yesterday?" Julian's expression immediately softened. "Come here, sweetheart." He lifted her onto his lap. "Daddy had to leave the party early. I'm sorry about that." "Are you sick?" "No, baby, I'm not sick." "Then why did you look so sad?" I felt a stab of guilt as Julian hugged our daughter close. Maybe I had been a little harsh last night. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," Julian said carefully, "but that doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Elliot. "Hope Julian recovered from that epic roast last night. You were on fire." I quickly typed back, "He's being a baby about it, but he'll get over it." When I looked up, Julian was watching me type. "Work?" he asked. "Just a friend checking in." "Which friend?" There was something about the way he asked that made me defensive. "Does it matter?" "God, Julian, now you're going to monitor my text messages." "I'm just asking." "Well, don't. I'm allowed to have friends." I stood up abruptly. "I'm going to shower. Try not to sulk all day, okay?" As I headed toward the bathroom, I heard Julian's phone ring. "Hi, Mom," he answered quietly. "Yes, I'm fine." "No, we haven't talked about it yet." I paused in the hallway, straining to hear more, but he lowered his voice. Whatever Margaret was saying to him, I was sure it wasn't supportive of me. In the shower, I tried to wash away my growing irritation. Julian was being ridiculous. So I'd made one joke at his expense. Big deal. Married couples teased each other all the time. He needed to develop thicker skin. My phone chimed with another text. This time, it was from my mother Dawn. "Still laughing about last night. That prune comment was gold. Don't let Julian guilt you about it. Men are so fragile these days." See, I thought. Normal people understood it was just humor. But when I came out of the bathroom, I found Julian in his office, carefully photographing documents spread across his desk. He had his phone out and was taking pictures of what looked like our bank statements. "What are you doing?" He glanced up calmly. "Just keeping records." "Records of what?" "Various things." He slipped his phone into his pocket. "Nothing for you to worry about." There was something unsettling about his tone. Too calm, too controlled. This wasn't the Julian I knew. The Julian I knew would have either blown up at me by now or apologized for overreacting. This strange, quiet version of my husband was making me nervous. "Julian, seriously, what's going on? You're acting weird." "Am I?" He gathered up the papers and put them in a manila folder. "I'm just being organized. You know how I am with documentation." He walked past me toward the living room, leaving me standing alone in his office. I noticed he'd locked his desk drawer, something he'd never done before. The rest of the day passed in uncomfortable silence. Julian was polite but distant, speaking to me only when necessary and focusing most of his attention on Tilda. He made lunch, helped her with a puzzle, and read her stories, but he barely acknowledged my presence. By evening, I was fed up. "Okay, this is ridiculous," I announced as Julian tucked Tilda into bed. "You can't give me the silent treatment forever." "I'm not giving you the silent treatment," he said quietly, kissing Tilda's forehead. "I'm just thinking." "Thinking about what?" He turned off Tilda's light and closed her door gently. In the hallway, he looked at me with that same, unnervingly calm expression. "About a lot of things, Morwenna. About what's important. About what I'm willing to accept. About what kind of example we're setting for our daughter." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done pretending that everything is fine when it's not." Before I could respond, he walked into the spare room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door and feeling more unsettled than I wanted to admit. This wasn't how Julian usually handled conflict. Usually, he tried to talk things through or just let it go. This cold, controlled version of him was completely foreign to me. I pulled out my phone and texted Elliot. "Husband still being dramatic about last night. Need a friendly ear tomorrow." His response came quickly. "Always here for you. Coffee after work." At least someone understood me. The next few weeks fell into a strange pattern. Julian continued sleeping in the spare room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me with his early morning routine. He was polite but distant, like a courteous roommate rather than a husband. At work, I found myself spending more and more time with Elliot. He was everything Julian wasn't: spontaneous, funny, and appreciative of my wit. When I told him about Julian's continued coldness over one silly joke, Elliot shook his head in disbelief. "Seriously, Morwenna, you deserve better than that," he said as we sat in the office break room. "A husband should be able to laugh at himself. The fact that he's still holding a grudge 3 weeks later says a lot about his character." Right? I felt validated hearing someone else say it. I mean, I could understand being a little hurt in the moment, but this is getting ridiculous. "You're vibrant and funny. You shouldn't have to dim your light just because your husband can't handle a little teasing." Elliot had a way of making me feel seen and appreciated. When he suggested we grab drinks after work to decompress, I didn't hesitate to say yes. That evening, I told Julian I was going out with colleagues for a work happy hour. It wasn't technically a lie. Elliot was a colleague, and we did work together. "What time will you be home?" Julian asked, not looking up from the financial documents he seemed to be constantly reviewing these days. "I don't know. Why does it matter?" "I'm just asking, in case Tilda wonders where you are." "She'll be asleep by the time I get back anyway." Julian made a note on a piece of paper. "Okay, have fun." His casual acceptance bothered me more than if he'd gotten jealous or possessive. A normal husband would ask more questions, would want to know who I was going with. Julian's indifference felt like another insult. Drinks with Elliot turned into dinner, which turned into more drinks at another bar. He was attentive and charming, hanging on my every word and laughing at all my jokes. When I told him about Julian's weird behavior lately, the locked desk drawer, the mysterious documents, the cold politeness, Elliot was appropriately outraged on my behalf. "He's trying to control you through emotional manipulation," Elliot said, leaning closer across the small table. "Making you feel guilty for having a personality. It's actually pretty toxic." "Do you really think so?" "Absolutely. You're this amazing, vibrant woman, and he's trying to make you feel bad for being yourself. That's not healthy." When Elliot's hand covered mine on the table, I didn't pull away. When he suggested we get a nightcap at his apartment, I hesitated for only a moment before saying yes. I didn't get home until after midnight. Julian was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of tea. "How was your work thing?" he asked without looking up. "Fine. Good networking." I tried to keep my voice casual, but guilt made me defensive. "Why are you still up?" "Couldn't sleep. Just getting some work done." I noticed he was looking at what appeared to be a calendar or schedule on his screen, but he closed the laptop before I could see clearly. "Julian, this is getting weird. What are you working on at midnight?" "Just organizing some things. Nothing important." But the way he said it made it sound very important indeed. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with Elliot deepened. We started meeting regularly after work, sometimes for drinks, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to talk in his car in the parking lot. He made me feel alive and appreciated in a way I hadn't felt in years. Meanwhile, Julian became increasingly distant. He was still a devoted father to Tilda, but with me, he was like a polite stranger. He asked no questions about my late nights, made no demands on my time, and showed no interest in trying to repair our relationship. At Tilda's school art night, I noticed other parents whispering and giving me strange looks. When I tried to join a conversation, the group dispersed awkwardly. "Is everything okay at home?" Tilda's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, asked me quietly as we looked at the children's paintings. "Tilda seems a bit unsettled lately." "Everything's fine," I said quickly. "Why would you ask that?" "She's been asking a lot of questions about divorce lately, whether kids have to choose which parent to live with. That sort of thing." My stomach dropped. I'm sure it's just something she saw on TV. but Mrs. Patterson's concerned expression suggested she wasn't convinced. That night, I confronted Julian about it. Tilda's teacher thinks there are problems at home. Have you been talking to her about divorce? Julian looked up from the papers he was sorting, always with the papers these days. I haven't mentioned divorce to Tilda. Then why is she asking about it at school? Maybe because her parents sleep in separate rooms and barely speak to each other anymore. Children pick up on tension, Morwenna. Well, maybe if you'd stop being so cold and distant. I'm not being cold. I'm being careful. Careful about what? About everything I say and do, about the choices I make, about the future. There was something ominous in his tone that made me uneasy. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm thinking about what's best for everyone involved, especially Tilda. Julian, if you're thinking about divorce, are you? The question caught me completely off guard. What? Are you thinking about divorce, Morwenna? Because you're certainly not acting like a woman who wants to be married. I don't know what you mean, don't you? He stood up and walked to his locked desk drawer, pulling out a key I'd never seen before. From inside, he withdrew a thick folder. Because I have some questions about your schedule lately. He opened the folder and pulled out what looked like a calendar with dates and times marked in his careful handwriting. March 15th, home at 12:47 a.m., said you were at a work happy hour. March 22nd, home at 1:15 a.m., said you were networking. March 29th, didn't come home until 2:30 a.m., said you lost track of time with colleagues. My mouth went dry. Are you tracking me? I'm documenting patterns. There's a difference. That's insane, Julian. You can't just... Can't what? Pay attention to when my wife comes home? Wonder why she's staying out until all hours of the night? Ask questions about her sudden need for so much after-work socializing. I felt trapped and angry. I'm allowed to have a social life. Of course you are. But you're also married with a 6-year-old daughter, and lately it seems like that's not a priority for you. Don't you dare question my priorities as a mother. I'm not questioning your love for Tilda. I'm questioning your judgment and your commitment to this marriage. The conversation was spiraling into dangerous territory. I could feel everything I'd built with Elliot threatening to come to light, and I wasn't ready for that. You know what, Julian? Maybe if you were more interesting, I wouldn't need to find stimulating conversation elsewhere. The words hung in the air between us like a confession. Julian's expression didn't change, but he made another note in his folder. Thank you for being honest, he said quietly. That's very helpful. Something about his calm response terrified me more than if he'd started yelling. What are you writing? Just notes, for my records. Your records for what? But Julian had already closed the folder and locked it back in his drawer. I think we should both get some sleep, he said. It's been a long day. As he walked toward the spare room, I called after him. Julian, what are you planning? He paused at the doorway and looked back at me. I'm planning to do what's right, Morwenna, for everyone involved. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving me alone with a growing sense that I was losing control of a situation I didn't fully understand. My social media post about the Wrinkled Prune comment had been a hit initially, but as weeks passed, the tone of the responses began to shift. What started as laughing emojis and supportive comments slowly transformed into something more critical. Poor guy, someone wrote. Public humiliation isn't funny. Imagine if a husband said this about his wife, another person commented. Everyone would be calling it emotional abuse. Your husband seems really nice from what I've seen. Maybe try building him up instead of tearing him down. I deleted the negative comments as fast as they appeared, but more kept coming. Worse, people at work were starting to treat me differently. Conversation stopped when I entered the break room. Colleagues who used to chat with me about weekend plans suddenly seemed too busy to talk. Even Elliot was becoming more distant. When I suggested we meet for drinks after work, he hesitated. Maybe we should cool it for a while, he said, not meeting my eyes. People are starting to talk. Talk about what? About us, about how much time we spend together. I heard Karen from accounting asking Jennifer if we were having an affair. The word affair hit me like a slap. That's ridiculous. We're just friends. Are we? Elliot asked quietly. The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to face. Of course we are, I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. That evening, I decided to take control of the narrative. I posted another update on social media. Some people are taking my harmless joke about my husband way too seriously. Marriage is about being able to laugh together, not walking on eggshells. Real talk, your marriage humor, dar get a life people. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Doubling down instead of apologizing, classy. Your poor husband, and your poor daughter who has to watch this. This isn't marriage humor, this is just mean. I started blocking people left and right, but the comments kept coming. Someone had shared my post in a local Facebook group, and strangers were weighing in with increasingly harsh judgments. At Tilda's school pickup the next day, I noticed other parents giving me strange looks and whispering among themselves. When I approached a group of mothers I usually chatted with, they suddenly found reasons to leave. "Mummy, why was Emma's mom looking at you funny?" Tilda asked as we walked to the car. "I don't know, sweetie. Some people are just rude." But I knew exactly why. The story of my public humiliation of Julian had spread beyond social media. In a small community like ours, gossip traveled fast, and I was becoming the subject of it. At home, Julian was in his office again, surrounded by papers and folders. I noticed he'd printed out screenshots of my social media posts and added them to his growing collection of documents. "Really, Julian? You're documenting my Facebook posts now?" "I'm documenting everything," he said without looking up. "It's important to have a complete record." "A record for what? Are you planning to divorce me?" "I'm planning to protect my interests. And Tilda's." The casual way he said it chilled me. What does that mean? It means I'm being thorough, making sure all the facts are clear. I noticed a business card on his desk, a law firm I didn't recognize. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" "I've talked to several people about various things." His evasiveness was maddening. "Julian, just tell me what you're planning." "I'm not planning anything yet. I'm just gathering information, making sure I understand all my options." "Your options for what?" "For protecting my daughter's future." The way he said "my daughter" instead of "our daughter" sent a chill down my spine. That weekend, we were supposed to attend Julian's parents' anniversary dinner. I'd been dreading it since the engagement party incident, but Julian insisted we needed to maintain appearances for now. The dinner was exactly as uncomfortable as I'd expected. Margaret was coldly polite, Gerard seemed disappointed, and Julian's sister Anna kept giving me looks that could freeze water. "So, Morwenna," Margaret said over the main course, "how are things at work?" "Fine," I said carefully, aware that everyone at the table was listening. "Still doing a lot of networking after hours?" The question was innocent enough, but something in her tone suggested she knew more than she was letting on. It's important to maintain professional relationships." "Of course," Margaret agreed, "though I imagine it must be difficult to balance that with family responsibilities." Julian was cutting his food with mechanical precision, not participating in the conversation, but clearly listening to every word. "I manage just fine," I said defensively. "I'm sure you do. It's just that Tilda mentioned you've been coming home very late lately. She worries when you're not there for bedtime." Heat flooded my cheeks. "Tilda is fine. She's well cared for." "Oh, absolutely. Julian is a wonderful father. So devoted, so responsible." Margaret's emphasis on those words felt pointed. "It's just a shame when one parent has to carry more of the load, don't you think?" I wanted to argue, but I could feel the entire table's disapproval pressing down on me. Even Julian's usually neutral father, Gerard, was nodding along with his wife's comments. After dinner, as we were leaving, Margaret pulled Julian aside for a private conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw her hand him a thick envelope. "What was that about?" I asked as we drove home. "Just family stuff." "What kind of family stuff?" "Nothing you need to worry about." But everything felt like something I needed to worry about these days. That night, I found Julian in his office again, this time with the contents of Margaret's envelope spread across his desk. It looked like legal documents, but he quickly gathered them up when I appeared in the doorway. "Julian, I need to know what's going on. This secrecy is driving me crazy." "Is it?" He looked at me with that same unnervingly calm expression. "How do you think I felt when I realized my wife was keeping secrets from me?" "What secrets?" "Really, Morwenna, we're still pretending." My heart started racing. "I don't know what you mean." Julian opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. From it, he withdrew several printed pages. "Elliot Crane," he said quietly. "IT specialist at your company. Single, 31 years old, drives a blue Honda Civic, license plate number." He read off a series of numbers and letters. My blood turned to ice. "How do you know about him?" "The same way I know you had dinner with him at Romano's on March 15th. The same way I know you were at his apartment until 2:30 a.m. on March 29th. The same way I know you've been texting him at all hours of the day and night." I felt like I was going to be sick. "You're spying on me?" "I'm paying attention. There's a difference." "Julian, it's not what you think, isn't it?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a text conversation, my conversation with Elliot from earlier that week. "You understand me in ways my husband never could," I had written. "He doesn't deserve you," Elliot had replied. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd never gotten married." "It's never too late to change your life." Seeing my own words displayed on Julian's phone made them look so much worse than they had felt when I'd written them. "You went through my phone?" "I didn't have to. You left it unlocked on the kitchen counter. The messages were right there." I felt trapped and desperate. "Julian, I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen, and now we have to deal with the consequences." "What consequences?" Julian closed the folder and looked at me with something that might have been sadness. "The consequences of choices, Morwenna. Your choices, and now mine." He stood up and walked past me toward the spare room. "Julian, wait. Can we talk about this?" "We are talking about it, just not the way you want to." "What does that mean?" "It means the time for talking is over. Now it's time for action." The door closed behind him, and I was left standing alone in his office, surrounded by the evidence of my betrayal and the growing certainty that my husband was planning something I wasn't going to like. The next morning, Julian was gone before I woke up. His coffee cup was in the sink, and there was a note on the kitchen table. "Took Tilda to school. We'll be late tonight. We need to talk when I get home." The formal tone of the note made my stomach churn. This wasn't the Julian I'd married, the man who left little love notes and drew smiley faces on grocery lists. This was someone else entirely. I called in sick to work, unable to face the whispers and sideways glances from my colleagues. Instead, I spent the day pacing around the house, trying to figure out how to salvage my marriage and my reputation. I tried calling Julian several times, but he didn't answer. I texted him, "We need to talk. I can explain everything." No response. By the time Tilda came home from school, dropped off by Julian's mother, which was unusual, I was a nervous wreck. "Where's Daddy?" Tilda asked, looking around the empty house. "He's working late, sweetheart, but he'll be home soon." "Is he still sad about the party?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean?" "He's been sad since you called him a prune. I don't think he liked that." I knelt down to Tilda's level, guilt washing over me. "Daddy knows Mommy was just joking." "But it wasn't a funny joke," Tilda said with 6-year-old honesty. "It was a mean joke." Out of the mouths of babes. I hugged my daughter close, realizing that even she understood something I'd been too selfish to see. Julian didn't come home until after Tilda was asleep. I heard his key in the door at nearly 10 p.m. and rushed to meet him in the hallway. "Julian, thank God. We really need to—" "Living room," he said quietly, not making eye contact. "Please." His tone was so formal, so cold, that it stopped me mid-sentence. I followed him into the living room, where he sat down across from me rather than beside me on the couch. "Julian, before you say anything, I want you to know that I'm sorry. About everything. About the joke at the party, about Elliot, about the way I've been acting. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this." He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said quietly, "about our marriage, about what's best for Tilda, about what I'm willing to accept in my life." "Okay," I said carefully. "And what have you decided?" Instead of answering, he handed me the envelope. "I think this will explain everything." My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were official-looking documents with a law firm's letterhead. The words at the top made my heart stop. Petition for dissolution of marriage. "Julian, no." The papers fluttered to the floor as my hands went limp. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "But we can work this out. Marriage counseling or—" "Morwenna, you called me a wrinkled prune in front of 50 people. You've been having an emotional affair with a co-worker. You come home at all hours of the night and lie about where you've been. You've humiliated me publicly and privately, and you've shown no genuine remorse for any of it." "I'm showing remorse now." "No, you're showing panic. There's a difference." I scrambled to pick up the papers, scanning them frantically. Words jumped out at me. Irreconcilable differences, custody arrangement, division of assets. "You want custody of Tilda?" "I want what's best for Tilda, and what's best for her is stability, consistency, and parents who respect each other. Since you seem incapable of providing the respect part, I'll provide the rest." "You can't take my daughter away from me." "I'm not taking her away. I'm asking for primary custody with generous visitation rights for you, assuming you can demonstrate that you're capable of putting her needs first." The clinical way he discussed our daughter's future was terrifying. "Julian, please, I know I've made mistakes, but I love you. I love our family." "Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise." "Yes, I know I got caught up in the attention from Elliot, but it didn't mean anything. It was just, I felt unappreciated, and he made me feel special." "So this is my fault. I didn't make you feel special enough, so you had to find it elsewhere." "No, that's not what I'm saying." "What are you saying, Morwenna? Because I've been trying to understand for weeks now. I've been trying to figure out when my wife stopped loving me and started seeing me as a target for mockery." The pain in his voice broke something inside me. "I do love you. I've always loved you." "You have a funny way of showing it." I was crying now, ugly sobs that made it hard to speak. "Please don't do this. Please give me another chance." Julian was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. "Do you want to know what the worst part is?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "It's not the affair. It's not even the public humiliation, though that was pretty devastating. It's the fact that you don't seem to understand why any of this is wrong. Even now, you're not apologizing for hurting me. You're apologizing for getting caught. That's not true. Isn't it? When you called me a wrinkled prune, were you thinking about my feelings? Or were you thinking about the laugh you'd get?" I opened my mouth to protest, but the truth stuck in my throat. He was right. I had been thinking about the audience, about being clever and funny, not about how my words would affect him. "When you started spending time with Elliot, were you thinking about our marriage? Or were you thinking about how good it felt to have someone appreciate you?" Again, I couldn't answer honestly without confirming his point. "And when you lied about where you were and who you were with, were you protecting our relationship, or were you protecting your affair?" "It wasn't an affair," I whispered. "What would you call it?" We didn't sleep together." "So that's the line. As long as you don't have sex with him, It doesn't count as betrayal. Put that way, it sounded pathetic even to me. Julian stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. I've been married to you for 8 years, Morwenna. I thought I knew who you were. I thought you were someone who would have my back, who would respect me even when we disagreed, who would prioritize our family over outside attention. I am that person. No, you're not. And maybe you never were. Maybe I just wanted to believe you were. The finality in his voice terrified me. Julian, please. I'll end things with Elliot. I'll delete my social media. I'll do whatever you want. It's too late for that. Why? Why is it too late? He turned back to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, a kind of resolved sadness. Because I don't trust you anymore, and I don't respect you anymore, and I can't be married to someone I don't trust or respect. The words hit me like physical blows. You don't mean that. I do. And deep down, I think you know I'm right. I think you've been trying to blow up this marriage for months now. Well, congratulations. You've succeeded. Julian, the papers are filed, Morwenna. My lawyer will be in touch with you about the details. I suggest you get your own representation. Where will you go? I'm not going anywhere. This is my home too, and Tilda needs stability. We'll figure out a temporary arrangement until the court decides on permanent custody. What am I supposed to tell people? The question slipped out before I could stop it, and Julian's expression hardened. You're worried about what people will think. After everything we've just discussed, that's your concern. I didn't mean, yes, you did, and that tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. He picked up his briefcase and headed toward the hallway. Where are you going? To check on Tilda, then to bed. I suggest you use tonight to think about what you want your life to look like going forward, because it's not going to look like this anymore. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by divorce papers, finally understanding that my husband wasn't bluffing. Julian, quiet, patient, boring Julian, had outmaneuvered me completely. And the worst part was, I was beginning to realize he was right about everything. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a lawyer's office, listening to a woman in an expensive suit explain just how thoroughly Julian had documented my behavior. Your husband has been very thorough, Attorney Sarah Martinez said, flipping through a thick binder. Text messages, social media posts, photographs, witness statements, financial records showing unusual spending patterns, and late-night charges at restaurants and bars. Is that even legal? Everything here was obtained legally. Text messages from your phone that you left unlocked in common areas of your shared home, public social media posts, receipts from joint accounts, and witness statements from people who were present at public events. I felt sick looking at the evidence laid out so methodically. Julian had been building his case for weeks, while I'd been obliviously digging myself deeper into a hole. What about my rights as a mother? You'll have rights, but your husband is asking for primary custody based on what he's calling a pattern of behavior that prioritizes personal gratification over family stability. He's documented instances where you came home after midnight on school nights, missed parent-teacher conferences, and publicly humiliated him in front of your child. I missed one conference. According to his records, you've missed 3 this school year, and there are statements from other parents about your daughter asking questions about divorce and expressing concern about your late nights. I slumped in my chair. What are my options? Honestly, your best option is to negotiate. Your husband seems reasonable. He's not asking for alimony. He's offering generous visitation, and he's willing to split assets fairly. If you fight this and it goes to court, all of this evidence becomes public record. Julian spent months quietly building a case while I flirted with Elliot and mocked my own husband in public, convinced I was the clever one. In mediation, his evidence was so overwhelming, I had to accept a deal that gave him the house and primary custody of our daughter, Tilda, while I walked away with scraps and alternate weekends. I thought the worst was over, until Julian gathered the same people who'd laughed when I called him a wrinkled prune, and, in that very restaurant, exposed my affair, my cruelty, and served me the final divorce papers in front of everyone. Only then did I realize he'd recorded everything, taken it all to a judge, and secured supervised visitation while making sure the whole social circle knew exactly why our marriage ended. The boring accountant I'd ridiculed had outplayed me completely, and I was left with nothing but public shame and the knowledge that I'd destroyed my own life for a bit of attention that was never worth it.